Welcome to the Intrazone Roadmap Pitstop August 2019 edition. This is a bonus monthly show that answers that burning question in your mind. Consider this the message center for everyone, not just for cloud admins. We'll keep everyone informed, current and ahead of the ever-curving Microsoft 365 roadmap. We've got a lot of items to cover, so here we go. This month, I talk with Wayne Ewington, Program Manager on the OneDrive and SharePoint engineering team, who currently focuses on the site swap feature that we announced at SharePoint Conference 2019 in May. Let's focus our attention on what has shipped for employee engagement. This is essentially all the new features and technology that we are releasing so that you have a great, well-connected, always informed populace within your intranet. The first item up is called Site Swap. This enables admins to be able to swap the location of the SharePoint root site with another site using a PowerShell command, invoke-spo site swap. The root site and any subsites will be archived automatically. So if you're in that state where you want a really nice modern site at the root site of your tenant, Site Swap is the feature for you. Next up, we're expanding the who can join a SharePoint hub site. This can now be performed by site owners. Previously, associating with a hub site required site collection admin privileges. We're updating this permission so site owners can associate their sites to a hub. This provides a more consistent experience across SharePoint and enables people to be a lot more self-service oriented. Stay tuned for our interview with Wayne Ewington, Program Manager on the OneDrive and SharePoint engineering team, where we talk about the site swap feature. So let's take a break in hearing about all the different roadmap items and go back to the one that we mentioned at the head of the employee engagement. We talked about site swap, and here to talk a little bit more about that and obviously to tell us a little bit more about how he and the engineering team go about building that and other features is Wayne Ewington. He is a program manager on the OneDrive and SharePoint team. And Wayne, first just introductions of who you are and what you do on the SharePoint team.
Okay, as Mark said, my name is Wayne Ewington. As you could probably tell based on my crazy accent, I'm actually from New Zealand. Been with Microsoft for coming up close to 19 years now. Spent the majority of that time working in consulting services, doing a lot of work around the Asia Pacific region. Then about 3.5 years ago, I moved into service engineering to get a feel for how we actually run and managed and operated SharePoint Online. And then about a year ago, I moved up here to Redmond, and now I'm a program manager working on what we call the SharePoint Infrastructure and Network team, or as we call it, SPIN. My main responsibilities here is looking after the user and the ODB lifecycle. So that's really around provisioning, deprovisioning, managing the quotas, and all that other good stuff that comes with it. And one of the other things I've been working on recently is this thing called Site Swap, which is what we're here to talk about today.
Wonderful. Well, I have one tiny little question, just knowing that you, from a services and a consultant perspective, did a lot of work with SharePoint. How has that mental and actually physical active shift from, helping people consult and point them in the right direction to then actually building it so that you can and take some of that feedback and actually make changes into the product? What's that adjustment been like for you?
Yeah, no, it's actually been an interesting challenge in the roadmap. I mean, as per a lot of people that have been working with SharePoint in the past, we've always done it from an on-premises perspective, where you had full access to everything and you could actually see and you could play around with stuff. From a SharePoint Online perspective, we're here to provide a service. So a lot of the inner workings and how we do stuff internally is a little bit and somewhat different from how you would expect like an on-premises environment to work. And, remembering that we've got a service, that we've got to, think about high availability, robustness, and making sure that our customers are happy has been one of the key learnings that I've actually, built up and learnt over the years that I've been here.
I think it's a great angle to come from, and obviously to know sort of the real guts of what's in the product and match that to what customers are trying to accomplish and then put that at scale for the entire world.
Absolutely.
We had one episode that we did with your friend Zach Rosenfield, and we took it from the data center all the way down to the service. That what is SharePoint Online, and it was really interesting to hear that take on. It's not SharePoint on-prem; it's its own beast, in the way that we scale it into the service. So, welcome to that team. Obviously, now for many months, but let's get into site swap. Before we go into the very particular feature, what is this general approach and philosophy behind the design of making it easier for people to adjust, what we call the modern internet, the intelligent internet? What do features like this, how do they culminate to offer this more modern internet? What does it mean from the spin perspective from your team?
So to be honest, we're part of the spin, so we're more of the internal, plumbing about how SharePoint works. So, from a modern experience perspective, we had an ask from one of our partner teams, which is the SharePoint Experience team, saying, how can we provide the ability to move and swap sites around inside the tenant such that it just works and makes it easy? So it was more around from a swapping perspective rather than making it from how do we actually get a modern site to the root. Yeah, so just kind of expanding on that. So really where our thinking went into this was, and provide a little bit more background, is that we've got this thing called the root site collection, and that's really our entry point into the SharePoint tenant. So, when we provision up a new tenant, we create what we call the root site collection. So that happens to be the site that happens to be at, for example, contosa.sharepoint.com. So being the entry point, that entry point is used for a lot of things such as navigation and browsing around the sites. It's also used by doing authentication, and it's also used by the APIs behind the scenes. So it's actually a very, very critical component that we've got. Now, the issue we've got is that if for whatever reason that root site collection isn't available, it can effectively mean that the tenant isn't available for the customers.
I remember in the early days, when people did want to build a most centralized portal. So they were using SharePoint Online with some of our older infrastructure tech, which we can get into because I know what you're swapping to is the more interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at that base component, a lot of people were really trying to figure out, how do I make this root site better? I want to give it its own branding. I want to up-level the navigation, and I certainly want to treat it as the place that my whole company goes when they think of a portal. Outside of some of the classic approach to what our publishing infrastructure was, that was the root site. And sometimes I saw people go and build a portal, but delete their root site or choose to do that because somebody was advising them to do that. And that always gave me, the hairs would raise on the back of my neck because it just felt like you were taking out the bottom, of that Jenga game, and it was just going to crash. So
exactly.
with that old way of doing it in mind, let's talk about site swap and why now with this better method. So where does this lead us now with what is effectively a better offering to our customers with the site swap?
So the site swap provides a safe and supported mechanism for replacing the root site with another site. What we have seen in the past is, as you kind of alluded to, and what customers have been doing, they've been following a number of unrecommended guidance on deleting the root site out and then wondering what went wrong. So what we've seen out of that is we've seen a lot of escalations internally. We've seen people not being able to access their SharePoint sites and also getting themselves into a lot of trouble by doing this. So with the site swap, it's all about being able to safely move a new site into the root such that you can do things such as, for example, get a nice brand new sparkling new communication site into the root and replace your team site with that.
I know it's going to be a breath of fresh air for anybody that even considered doing it in an old way. And for really people, like we had mentioned at the very front of the interview, this want of a new modern intranet, all the pieces are there. It's just putting it into the right place or moving things around. I think of this particular feature being really at the core of really centering on a new modern approach from the ground up, literally from the root up. But I know that we have other features that are in the same category. Where we've got the ability to rename a site URL. We make it really easy to associate sites into a hub site. When you take the lens of moving things around in SharePoint, which used to be fairly rigid, how is it that you and team are thinking about that fluidity of the intranet?
We're trying to make it as easy as possible for customers is really what we're trying to do. Like a lot of the stuff, you kind of look at the surface of it and go, that's actually quite easy. And, why haven't you done this before? But if you start kind of peeling away and actually looking at the dependencies that other systems have on it, it's actually quite complex. For example, renaming a site, you kind of think, what's the big deal with that? That's just changing a URL. But the downstream consequences of that is that if you've got like file syncs, or if you've got any static URLs out there, or if you've got even like, for example, a OneNote stored in that location, the OneNote is constantly syncing and you can potentially, end up with a bit of pain from the customers. So what we try to do with a lot of these features is, where are the users going to be impacted by this? How can we address that and how can we best, mitigate and make that a more cleaner experiences for our customers? One of the things we've done differently is the way that we're actually rolling out this feature. We're really following a non-traditional approach where we are releasing it based on customer size as to who can actually invoke this particular or use this particular feature. That's raised a couple of questions internally as well as externally from a couple of people. And really the reason behind this is that we're trying to get some learnings and understandings about what's it like to move a portal, which could be a very high volume website, and put it into the root, and also, which is usually and traditionally a very high volume website as well. So we'll be doing this very interesting phased approach where we've been looking at a heuristic which equates roughly to the size of the customer and slowly releasing it out to the customers that way. So at the moment, we're currently at about just under 1,000 or approximately 1,000 seats, and we're hoping to push that out to a higher number very, very shortly.
I'm going to take the obvious that's staring me in the face is that you previously, before coming to the SharePoint team, spent a lot of time with customers who got themselves into these troubles or hit some of our pain points and issues. And it makes complete sense now that you're on the flip side, solving those before customers hit them in the first place. Kudos to good career choices, both for you, and I'm thanking you on behalf of being your marketer. Obviously, really great stuff to be able to share with our customers, and then obviously the actions that they can take. I wanted to thank you, Wayne, for your time today. Thank you for what you and the team are doing. If there's anything that anybody can either follow you personally or things that you would like to point people to, Twitter handles, we obviously will link to both the OneDrive and the SharePoint blog. Anything that you would suggest for people if they wanted to follow a little bit more closely around what you and your team does?
Probably best to reach out and get me a hold of me on LinkedIn would be the best way. So,
all right. Well, I'll put your LinkedIn information in there if you're all right with that. Wayne Ewington, as a program manager coming from the services world, congratulations for everything you're doing, and thank you for your time today.
You're more than welcome.
Always with teamwork, we're trying to align how people can just work better together. We've got 4 items for you this month in how teamwork comes together in Microsoft 365. First up, comments on non-Office files. We've had comments on Office files for a while now. When you're in an individual file and you want to have a discussion that it's associated and actually carries forward with that file, you can now do that from the information pane on that individual file. It's really easy to add your comments right in line with the file. You can even @mention people. Now you have the ability to do this on non-Office files, which essentially gives you the capability to add comments to any file that you store in OneDrive or SharePoint. Next up, you can get direct links to individual PowerPoint slides. This can be a super powerful way to share your ideas and information right in context. So instead of sending somebody a PowerPoint slide and referring them to go to, say, slide 75, you can now create a direct link to slide 75 and say, hey, check out this slide, and it'll go right to that point in the PowerPoint slide in the context with how you directed that person to get there. Really easy to do. Right-click on the slide that you want to send an individual link to, pops up the same sharing notion so that you can choose how you want to share it with view or edit permissions and other things. And then just that, you add it to an email, add it to a conversation, boom, direct link to an individual PowerPoint slide. Next up is Popular Around Me. You'll find this in the Shared With Me tab within the Shared tab of OneDrive all up. This actually surfaces files that are being recommended to you based on the working relationships to help you find relevant and trending information faster and discover that content you might not have been aware of. And when it's based on all the content that's being shared with you, if it has some relevant popularity of other people engaging with that content, you'll see it right there bubble up to the top. Next up, activity highlights in the file hover card. This feature shows relevant activities related to the files that you're working on. If someone you work with edits, comments, or @mentions you, this activity will be displayed in the file hover card, along with a link to take you directly to that related activity. Note at this time, this rollout is excluded from Office 365 subscriptions in GCC, our government cloud. That is it for teamwork. Let us round the corner and get on into some related items. I got 3 for you. The first one is a big announcement that we made between Samsung and OneDrive. We made a pretty big announcement between Samsung and Microsoft, really bolstering our partnership. And specific to OneDrive that played its role, the Samsung Gallery will now back up all of the photos that you take on a Samsung device directly to OneDrive as a default experience. We also highlighted the value of scanning documents and the value of Personal Vault that will be coming as default experiences on Samsung devices. Specifically, they announced the Note 10 and the Note 10 Plus. We're very excited to be a default experience on Samsung devices and, of course, highlighting the value of how OneDrive can help you back up and protect your content into the cloud. Next related item are updates to the Yammer mobile app. With this update, we're excited to share a new landing experience that takes the user right to their feed, not just the list of their groups, so they can get caught up on all of what's happening across the network. In addition to the feed update, the Yammer mobile app now supports participation in live events, both in iOS and Android. It also reduces the visual clutter to help you get caught up on conversations across your company much faster. And we now have mobile support for a previously mentioned Yammer Q&A function. So we had talked about the web update where you can do Yammer question and answer, and that capability now comes so you can engage on those discussions through the Yammer mobile app. If you want to look for that discussion that we had previously with Kaleem Rahman, you'll get a sense more about what that feature is. It now comes with mobile support. And the last thing, one of the most important things, it's just gotten more beautiful because the new Yammer icon shows through now on mobile. You'll see that within your start screen if you've got Yammer highlighted and prominently placed. The last thing that I want to mention that's related is within the Microsoft To-Do application. They've added the capability to have what they call list groups. So if you have a list or a set of lists that you want to package together or maybe even archive, you can now do that. I've created one for all of the OneDrive lists that I've been managing recently, and now it's in a way where I can collapse down and see just one item. When I want to access them all, I can then see all the lists that I'm managing, but group them better together and save a little bit more on that visual space when I'm actually looking through all my lists. They had one item around archive. Now it's just as simple to create a list group called archive and put any list that you want inside there. This related item falls on the related list primarily because I just like the Microsoft To-Do app. And when it gets better and helps you organize both your work and life, I think it's worth mentioning. Give it a try. Next up, I'll talk about features that are coming soon, very soon, in September 2019. It's time for teasers. Teaser number 1. New document management actions for SharePoint in Flow. If you're doing anything with SharePoint in Microsoft Flow, you of course want to have those new document management actions to better manage your documents through the cycle of a workflow. Teaser number 2 is pretty straightforward. The recommendations web part for Pages and News will show related and recommended content, further extending that offering to your consumers based on what's inside your news and page at that time. That's it with the teasers. We're close to the end of the pit stop. From a resources perspective, we've added a list of important resource links in the show notes based on this month's innovation. These links will assist you in learning more about the Message Center, the Microsoft 365 Public Roadmap, our SharePoint and OneDrive community blogs, and all things Twitter. All those places that you need to get up to speed and, of course, to stay ahead. We hope you've enjoyed this nice, smooth ride through the pit stop. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Thanks for listening to the Intrazone Roadmap Pitstop August 2019 edition. Do stay engaged, ask your questions, push us to get the best information and insights that you need. We're here to put our and your best change management foot forward. Stay safe out there on the roadmap. Till next month, thanks for tuning in.